Well, when we talk about the high-performance workplace, it's kind of a higher-level term which covers several areas that many organizations already were doing but are increasingly becoming kind of more closely related. Because one of the things we found is that people who were dealing with issues around social software, collaboration, content management, portals, security, workflow, HR applications, enterprise applications, all of those things are really affecting how you make your workforce more effective. That's really what they're about. So the high-performance workplace area of research within Gartner really looks at the intersections between all of those different areas, always with the focus of how do you make people more effective. So that's really kind of how we define it. It's the intersection between all those elements which concentrate on personal or individual productivity. It wasn't that easy, necessarily. It can be deceptively easy because there's lots of vendors who are ready to say, yep, we got one. All you have to do is buy it from us and install it and you're done. We don't generally believe that that's the case. They usually need to be designed and implemented with a bit more care. So, there's really lots of areas that talk about how you really need to design and how you need to sustain it. But really the primary area to focus on is going to be connecting with end users. That very often is part of the biggest challenge because there's plenty of technology. There's plenty of things that can, plenty of toys and functions and benefits and whistles, that can be provided. But it really is providing the right ones in the right way that provides the real challenge. So when we work with organizations who are looking to focus on HPW, we spend a lot more time talking about how do you get the right input from users? How do you find out where the bottlenecks are? And then figuring out how to apply technology in a very selective way to be able to help them meet some of those needs. And that already then sets it up for the next phase of how to make it sustainable. If you've done it right, it becomes sort of naturally sustainable because you have really addressed it on the issues that people need to deal with. Now, I realize that's not easy. There have been lots of issues where adoption may be not as high as it should be, or adoption may be spotty, where these people use it effectively and these people don't see the value, and so they don't pick it up. So it does become a kind of a constantly self-reinforcing effort and message to be able to continue to show people why these can really help them become more individually effective, why they need to be taking it, and then making sure that it actually does provide those benefits. You see that there's a couple signs that show that companies are operating with a high-performance workplace. One is that they have fewer boring meetings. Because there's less need to have them because people are already keeping up with what they're doing. They already know kind of what's going on. They don't need to have the Monday morning status meeting that everybody dreads and ends up being a waste of time in many cases. They tend to be having fewer conflicts about individual decisions of saying, who has the latest version of the data? Are we working from the right spreadsheet? What does this number mean? The discussions that they're having aren't focusing on that. They're focusing on, okay, now we know where the issues are with the product. What are we going to do about it? We know this is what customers say about us. What are we going to do about it? So that's another sign that people actually do have a high-performance workplace when when the discussions that they have focus on this is what we know. What do we do about it? And not, what does this actually say? Do we trust it? Do we know what it means? Where does it come from? Who has said it? I think that's another indication that people are working with a high-performance workplace. I think another indication is that they're not, also deriving from discussions they're not having. They're not necessarily arguing about, should we be using IBM or Microsoft or Google? They're not making a lot of very product or vendor kinds of arguments in terms of what should be our platform. They've kind of gotten beyond that, and they understand that lots of vendors have viable, useful, powerful products, but what really is important is what we want to do. And we're going to figure out what we want to achieve and how, and then we'll look for the right tool that might be that will make it possible to do it. Not necessarily saying that they'll pull products willy-nilly from left and right. It could be that there will be an architecture defined so that will meet most of their requirements. But the real discussions again move on from the technology, on from the particular implementation into what do we need to get from it, and what are we going to do with it. I've seen lots of different patterns from many organizations. Certainly, if it comes from the top, it's a lot easier. because then budgets appear and it's easier to get some validation. It really does provide that kind of validation that it's something that the organization really is committed to. So the higher the better, but it's not necessarily that it only comes from there. In fact, with the kind of adoption that we've seen in many environments is where there will be individual business units. This is how it will often start. Individual units will do something useful. Then another business unit will do other thing useful. So one might be creating a wiki that will start collecting. The IT department might have a wiki that says this is where we'll keep track of all of the maintenance operations that we're doing on a particular piece of software. Maybe the consultants will start having a discussion forum where they will collect frequently asked questions about a particular implementation. So there'll be these kinds of individual things, something happening here, something happening there. And then the organization will kind of see that and say, aha, good things are happening. Now we want to implement it more widely. And that's when it starts to go up a level. It may be an individual practitioner, a project manager, or somebody involved with the business who will find some kind of solution and start to use it themselves, with or without IT really sanctioning it. When it gets to that next level, when it gets to that, when you're moving away from the pioneer phase, that's one term I like to use that. The pioneers are the ones who go out and find the technology and pull it in. They don't need IT support. In fact, they don't want IT support because they think that IT is just going to come and shut them down. So when it moves from that phase into the next phase where the organization says, okay, we can see value from it, let's do it more widely. Then it's moving into the settler phase. So the settlers come after the pioneers, and they bring their families and they want to create farms rather than just sleep under the stars. So the settlers do want some IT support. They ask the questions like, well, should we plant corn or potatoes, or is the water safe to drink? In this case, they'll be asking, well, when do I use a blog and when do I use a wiki? They look kind of the same to me. When should I use which one? Or if I used to put this information into my ERP system, so do I not put it there anymore? How does it affect the processes that I'm using now? So the settlers need that kind of guidance. They need more IT involvement. They need a bit more guidance so that they kind of know how they should be using it and what they should not be doing it. So that's how it really then starts to become adopted. When it gets into that kind of a stage, and that's when IT starts to play a larger role. Now, the business leaders and the senior leaders are certainly not separated from it. They're still involved. You still need that kind of validation. But in that kind of a phase, in terms of creating a more consolidated environment and setting up the policies and frameworks, that's one where IT plays a larger role, although it should always be the feeling, the end users always should have the feeling that it's their system. It's theirs and not some that's being pushed at them from IT.